Good evening and welcome to tonight's Guardian Live event. For those of you that do use Twitter, we'd love to hear from you during and after the show. Please use the hashtag GuardianLive, but please keep your phones on silent. Now, please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to tonight's guest, Marina Hyde and Richard Osman.
Hello, everybody. Can I just say on mine and Marina's behalf, if you do use Twitter, don't tweet anything about this evening, because then we can't say anything rude, can we?
We can't libel anyone.
Yeah, exactly. We would very much like to. Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen, fellow members of the Anti-Growth Coalition. Lovely to see you all here. It is my great pleasure to be speaking to someone who's been described as Britain's premier satirist, whose prose has been described as, and I quote, frequently hilarious with incredibly bleak undertones. And, exclusive reveal, as of this afternoon, is a Sunday Times best-selling author as well. I feel like I should have held that applause over. So let's get one more round of applause. Marina Hyde, please, everybody. Hello there.
Hello. I have to sit forward because I actually don't touch. If I do go back later, I just want everyone to understand that.
It's very Ronnie Corbett.
Yeah, it is.
I think. Lovely to have you all here in the hall and everyone watching at home as well. They just said, just before we came on, 2 billion people watching online. Can you believe it?
It's incredible, just like the Oscars, which apparently hardly anyone watches at all, but there's a big sign outside that says 1 billion people are watching you before you go on.
Yeah, of course there are.
It doesn't work.
Everybody at home, you can send your questions in. There's a Q&A thing on the I look forward to those, don't you?
Very much
you can
so.
write whatever questions you want, and we will select the best and possibly craziest. Marina, we're here to talk about what just happened, which I have to say, it is a magnificent book, a collection of your columns over the last 6 years. It's so funny and so full of wisdom. It's quite a tough read in one go, I'll say that.
It's so relentless.
Which is what I had to do.
Yeah.
You'll all be able to just keep it on the downstairs table and you will have such joy over the next few months just turning to columns. But all in one go, what was it like to compile it all in one go?
It was, well, I mean, I actually, the story of the compilation of it was, unfortunately, owing to COVID, I had no childcare, and I had to go, I don't know if you know a place called Kidzania. Yeah. It's like one of the circles of hell, and it's...
I think that's where everyone's being deported to, isn't it? Is that right?
They all have to work in the little police station and stuff. It's a, for those who don't know what Kidzania is, it is like a little city where children can pretend to have jobs in like the vet surgery, and they can be coppers and like farming and things like that. And I had to take my children there in the middle of, for quite a long time at half term with just this mayhem noise, and sit there in a pretend cafe doing the selection for this book. And my children kept running up to me and saying, "We can't get jobs in the newspaper." And I was like, well, it's very realistic. Go and be a copper instead. But and when I was going through it, anyway, I did then go over the selection, so it's not actually the work of a completely deranged mother, but it was going through it, and I just thought, I've got to break up the politics. I'll have to do like a year, 2016, and then, let's have a bit of celebrities now, and then 2017, it's getting much worse, and then, let's have a bit of sport, and then 2018, it's really bad now. And so I had to divide it up like that. So, but it is relentless. I mean, I think all newspaper columns should just, I know I've done a book, but should sort of, burn after reading. They should sort of evaporate 24 hours afterwards, as like they did in the old days, but instead they're just there. So having to look over a lot of it, I was thinking, I can't actually remember half of the stuff that happened. I think I buried it.
Yeah, we all did.
For mental health reasons.
We all did, but thank you for bringing it back.
Yeah, yeah. But there are bits in there that I just thought, why did Michael Howard threaten war with Spain? Why did he do that? And you're like, what is an indicative vote? You can't remember any of this stuff. And then some of the quotes from the people, and you just think, I really, none of us should have had to go through any of this.
Do you know what it reminded me of more than anything? I was thinking this when I was reading it. So you're reading it, and it sort of goes Brexit, Trump. There's a lot going on. But do you know when you're watching, especially this new series of Grand Designs, and they built a big hole that's filled with water, and they're having trouble getting the wood, and it says December 2019, and you look at it, they think, oh man, this can't get any worse. And you always know what's going to happen. But it's sort of, there's some trauma in there, but you're reading it as a history of the last 6 years, but also as a history of yourself as a writer. Psychologically, have you got better, do you think? How are you feeling about the early ones, both about the news and about the prose?
I tell you what, it sounds so sort of wanky talking about finding your voice, but it just means like you can turn in a column that you don't literally detest every single week. But I hate lots of the things I write, most of the things really.
I think you are in a minority. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you, you're very kind. But at the start of, I first found my sort of voice in a celebrity column called Lost in Showbiz that I did, and then the sports thing. And it was actually really only about the time that I've started this book from that I think that I've started just thinking, I used to spend a long time trying to copy other guys, maybe older guys, and try and write politics columns in the way that I thought they ought to be written. And I think people are quite sniffy about it. And I don't actually, I always misuse the phrase gatekeeper. I've already told you this tonight, Richard, so I don't really know if I'm using it in the right way. But I just thought, I'm just going to stop playing this game I can't win. I'm going to be myself, and I'm just going to write it. I can see how I want to write about it, which is via recourse to things that people actually do enjoy, like movies and like pop music and sport and things like that, because they don't seem to enjoy politics very much.
I think that's right. The second you mention Peter Andre, people suddenly go, well, hello.
Oh,
okay,
hello.
I'm into this.
I'd like to hear about what the Lib Dems have done, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a way of...
But isn't that interesting, the moment that you finally go, oh, I'm going to stop copying, and you know what, for good or for ill, I think this is who I am and how I write.
And it was that mad time, when the referendum result had gone in a different way to the way I voted, but not obviously other people were very happy about it, but it was such a sort of tumultuous time, and then the Conservatives were having their leadership, Boris Johnson launched a leadership bid, and then Michael Gove knifed him, and then there was Andrea Leadsom. It was like, they did it actually all in 2 weeks. I always think the Conservatives are really they're kind of like a Terminator. You can mow it down, but then it will just start getting back up and literally rebuilding itself while it's walking towards you to try and kill you again. And so that all happened in about 2 weeks. But because I was writing every day and it was really intense, it was just a sort of sudden baptism into a different way of writing about it that I then stuck with.
It's always like the very last episode of Game of Thrones when they've got so much they've got to clear up in a single hour. I would say particularly during COVID times, I think that people found your columns very soothing. I think during the whole thing people did, and I think there was a sort of sanity check in there. I think Matt Hancock could do something on a Tuesday, and at least you think, oh God, at least it gives Marina something to write about.
I was really worried about getting the tone right. I remember when it all sort of started happening, and I remember thinking, oh God, this is such a huge thing, and obviously, so many people are going to die, and it's going to be really difficult to try and find the right tone, because I do actually always think that tone is literally everything in writing, and there's lots of people, occasionally it's really unfortunate, you read someone and they've got loads of really good ideas, but the tone's wrong, and so you just think, oh no, that's all wrong. And often I have absolutely nothing to say, but if I happen to have got the tone right, then people are really nice and say, I liked it, and it's a real sleight of hand, but it couldn't be that for COVID, and so I really struggled to think, oh God, I need to make sure I get this right. But I knew that, obviously, as time went on and it was going more and more wrong, the response, I knew that I could find a way of doing it. But I was nervous about getting the right tone, because I didn't want people to say, why are you joking about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Although you can joke about everything. You really can joke about most things. And some of the... there's columns in this...
Well, I don't think John Cleese would agree with you. I don't think you can... you can't say anything these days.
Oh, it's really sad.
But
it's a hero.
You think you can if
there's columns in here that, I remember watching Brett Kavanaugh's interview, his confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court. I've never seen a job interview like it, where a guy is literally screaming, crying, having to leave the room. Obviously still got the job and will now affect women's bodies and a whole lot more for 30 years. I mean, I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? Because I knew that, the temptation is to sit there and just say this is the worst thing. I mean, it is utterly awful. But I thought everyone sort of knew that might be the way you might cover it. So I thought if I just do it in his voice, and I'll just do a monologue in his voice. So it did have lots of jokes in it, but there was a real anger underneath it. And I often think you can, funnily enough, since I've tried to tell many, many more jokes that I believe I've been able to make much more serious points in my columns.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It certainly helps with. Well, they have to be good jokes, is the truth, and your jokes are terrifically good. But it's interesting because I sense you have a conflict avoidance view of the world and of how the world progresses, and you are having You must have been living through some despair, because everybody was, and every week you've got to sit down twice and just bang this stuff out and entertain people and make people laugh. And there must have been bits of you just going, I can't. At some point, I just want to scream, and I can't do a column that's just that.
Well, in
because,
a way,
because how many words is that?
Yeah, you can't scream because people just sort of switch off, and you can't sort of. I always try and keep the anger out because I do think people feel they're being shouted at if you're quite angry, and then that's just provokes a kind of switch-off mechanism. But it is actually quite. I have to say, therapists recommend writing everything down, and it is actually quite therapeutic to have to write the columns. And there's something about the sort of mechanics of sitting there trying to get to not the best joke about it, but a joke that when you think of it, you think, okay, that'll work. There's just a feeling, and you think that will work. That's actually quite therapeutic. So I feel I have fewer unresolved news issues than maybe other people, and would strongly recommend, writing 1,000 words about it every now and then.
Well, there is one of the things about when you've been watching the news, or if you are anti-Trump and you watch Trump, or COVID, is that sense of impotence, that sense of something's happening in the world I can't do anything about. You, I guess, are able to go, I can do a tiny thing, but at least I'm doing something.
It is. It's something to do while it's happening. I really struggled with.
It was something to do.
It was something to do. I struggled with, and also I felt that for so long I was saying to our children, none of this is normal. This isn't normal. Present's not like. But my daughter's 8, and really it has been quite normal for most of her life. All of this stuff. So you start thinking, God, I mean, I'm now trying to explain it didn't used to be like this to children, and you're thinking, this is sort of, I wish I could try and sort of help us back onto the tracks. I feel like the British, lots of politics kind of left the rails in around about 2015, 16, and then we have not course corrected yet. We're not back on the rails.
Do you know what? It literally went off the rails pretty much the day after David Cameron said, "Or chaos with Ed Miliband." Yeah. And I'd like to bang into him one day, but no, I wouldn't actually. I don't like to bang into politicians at all. But every time I think of something, I get that flashing mental screensaver of him on the steps of the shepherd's hut with his mug, just like, I'm all right, I'm fine. I get that mental image many times a week. Oh my, blimey, are you okay? There are support groups for that sort of thing. It's been a troubled time, but your reputation has grown and grown and grown. And it's grown, I think, because week after week after week, the quality of what you write is extraordinary. I mean, genuinely, in terms of explaining things and writing jokes, making people feel better. And it's led to an enormous amount of praise. Can I just read a couple of things off the back of this book? And imagine you from 6 years ago. Here, Gary Lineker, as witty as it is withering, brilliantly funny. Phoebe Water-Bridge, the most lethal, vital, screamingly funny truth teller of our time. 2016, you'd have taken that.
If you told me that all the silly things I'd written about politics would be in a book, then I literally just couldn't possibly believe it. I don't know why. It's been people have just come along for the ride. I just do really feel like it's a sort of gang enterprise in a way that I don't want to call it satire because it sounds so pretentious, but I don't think satire changes anything at all, and it never has in the whole of human history. But I really think that it is a balm, and it's a way, things, satirical creations of other people in my life have been the biggest thing that have got me through things and made me laugh and said, yes, thank you, you see me, and you've created this wonderful, maybe it's the thick of it or something like that. You say, yes, it's exactly like that, and you've given me the word omnishambles, and now I have it. And so I always think that there's something about it that you're in a lovely gang, and you're saying, come on, we're in a gang together, and it's us against awful old them. And I've just always tried to be a friend to the readers, because so many readers write brilliant things and send me like weird poems and fun stuff, you know, like about politics. Like, I get a lot of politics poems.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like them, and I really, you know, and everything from haikus to really quite long things. So those people are taking the advice and they're writing it down.
I hear you saying you like them. The eyes are screaming, help me.
People are always really apologetic. I don't know if you'd like to look at this. I've written quite a lengthy poem about what happened here. I always just think, well, good on you, you know, well done. Can you do my holiday cover?
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just I'll just one of those next week.
Yes.
That's a week off, isn't it?
Yeah.
So listen, I'm going to ask you, what has just happened, do we think? Why have we gone off the rails?
I don't know, Richard. That's why I put it like that, with a question mark.
Oh, I know that.
I don't know what has just happened. It's still happening. I really wanted to be sort of promoting this book and able to say, God, wow, we all went through something, didn't we, for 6 years? Do you remember that? It was totally odd. And now it's like, oh my God, like as of 2 weeks ago, you're sitting there saying, wow, the lesson is it can always get worse.
But it
can always get worse. I'm sorry, to put that on the front. The lesson is it can always get worse.
Always get worse, and probably will. But that's the thing. Throughout history, we always think our politics is awful. That's the truth.
Yes.
We always think our politicians are venal. We all think we've never lived through anything so awful. You know, whether Blair is in or Thatcher is in, whoever's in, we all think, oh, this is it. We all think there's fascism around the world. So I always think, oh, perhaps are we overreacting? But I think we live with very unusual politics and very unusual politicians. And I think there is a break from the past with that, which probably did happen in the last decade.
I think that people, because of living memory, people think of the consensus era politician, which was really amazing. Yeah. People came through the fire of the Second World War. They'd been through terrible things. The people who were in power just immediately during the war, they'd all had these amazing lives, and they actually kind of pulled together and did some pretty good things. And that sort of went on in lots of ways for about 30 years. Intakes that followed, I don't know, the 80s onwards, I think there has been a tailing off in the calibre, which is now a cliff edge. But, you know, politicians were horrendous in the 19th century and the 18th century. I mean, you know, they didn't care less. So it's difficult for us to know. I think because we came after that period, we're kind of conscious of, I don't want to sound like Tony Soprano's. I feel like I'm just coming at the end of something good.
That's who you remind me of, Tony Soprano. Do you know what? It had been bugging me.
But we've come after something good. And yes, I do think that what I've watched definitely in the last 6 years, is, you know, you think, God, I really have watched the death of shame in public life, which did used to exist, and as a concept did exist. I think when you've had, you know, the Prime Minister go on television every night and say, you've got to obey these laws, it's a matter of life or death, is then found to have broken his own laws, is like investigated and fined by the police, and then just says, no, I can carry on being Prime Minister. It's like, okay, something has changed. Yeah. And then it's always just easier for the next people to be shameless as well, because...
Standing on the shoulders of pygmies.
Just standing on... I think that's where, yeah. I mean, it's really hard to put these things back in the box. You know, it's a little bit like once Henry Kissinger's won the Nobel Peace Prize. It's never quite the same.
Well, that's the thing. I do think the key thing is consensus politics. And listen, consensus politics never meant that everyone agrees with each other.
No.
It just meant that there was an orderly... you know, power shifted in an orderly manner.
Now it's like a pig war. You know,
yeah,
I mean, it's like an actual... It's you know, you're watching a sort of rumble or I don't know.
And how much of that has come from social media, the monetization of polarization, which is very clear on Facebook, on Twitter, and all sorts of things. And the fact, I think, personally, that the right have weaponized it far better than the left. The left will never refuse to take the bait. And the left have essentially been trolled for about 10 years by the right.
They had some good trolling of their own, I've got to tell you.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I mean...
But they just haven't won power. So,
no.
So someone was doing it better.
They have, yes. I mean, social media has definitely catalysed it completely, and also that, we're all sort of dopamine addicts, and you look at your phone and you think, has something happened? Has somebody done something? You know, you go out of the room and you think, I must quickly just check if some more news has happened. Yeah. You should be able to leave the news for 2 weeks on end. And Matthew Parris always said to me, once before, if you want to find out what's going on in the news, ask someone who doesn't follow the news. If that's what you want to find out what's going on in politics, just a few things will cut through, and that's basically it. But now, where every cough and spit, there are about 4 news cycles a day. Also, I think it's like a Wild West, because you've now got politicians on Twitter. You've got someone like Nadine Dorries or Jacob Rees-Mogg who will say anything on Twitter. And in the old days, you think back to New Labour times, and they all had to have a pager and say the same message. And if they went off that message, they would get rewired by Alistair Campbell. Or just maybe like put
Gentler times, gentler times.
Gentler times.
Yeah.
And now, it's completely lawless. I think it's a real problem, and I think just to sort of try and, it's very difficult to get any of these things back in the box, and I don't really see how we're going to in the immediate future.
Well, it's fascinating to see Suella Braverman saying,
oh my
just
God.
very. That's a hell of a reaction. This is like, we should come and
She'll
do
be
Panto.
playing in Kettering this Christmas.
She probably will be.
She will be. Yeah.
It's fascinating to see her very publicly be able to say, the thing I like most is baiting lefties.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's something you can say behind closed doors, but you are the Home Secretary of our entire
She says
country.
it all out loud. What about I have a dream, and it's putting people on a plane to Rwanda? It's like, I mean, I'm
it's the
obsessed
kind of,
with it.
I wish I had a column to write about it. That would be that would be very nice. This thing of the attention economy, though, which is response is the only thing.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you're looking for. You're looking for someone to respond to you. You quite often see the controversialists on Twitter will say something, 800 people will reply, and you just want to say to those people, you've just paid that person's wages. That is all you've done, because the newspaper industry pays by
I think it's even more, though. I actually think it's like you just work for the platforms. And I almost see those arguments that happen on Twitter now, those kind of, I just see them almost like those green numbers coming down in the matrix. It doesn't really matter what the information is about. It might be about some left-wing argument, it might be about some celebrity feud. It's literally, you're just all working for some guy who owns the platform, and it's going to be Elon Musk. You just work for the platform. You think you're advancing your cause, you think you're advancing, that you work, you're a Labour activist, you're a this activist. I don't think you are at all. I literally just think you work for some guy. They want you to stay angry because it keeps you on the platform longer. That's all of those technologies work by staying angry so you're on the platform longer. And the only reason they want to develop like driverless cars and whatever is so that you can be online longer.
Yeah.
They will talk about that behind closed doors, but I never even think they really work for their parties at all. It's just noise.
But isn't that the newspaper industry as well? That's the exact thing, isn't it?
I mean, newspaper columnists. What about that? I don't know if this is actually true, but for our purposes.
Yeah, let's just say this is true, whatever we're about to hear.
In ancient China, wasn't that thing that you pay the doctor until you get ill, and then you stop paying the doctor, and then the money resumes again once you're well again? I actually feel a lot of newspaper columnists, and I include myself, just pay them to not talk, not say anything, not to write their column. If there is an unfortunate outbreak of opinion and they just can't help themselves one week, you say, that's all right, you just don't get paid for this week. I think opinions and pundits have got us into half the places where we are, which is, I know, this is my job, so there we go. But I mean, I feel I can see it. But for a long time, reality TV had these kind of monsters that you booked, and they were, they were looking for conflict always. And so you thought, these people will clash, there'll be fireworks there. And then they gradually started importing that onto the sort of This Morning sofa. And then eventually, all the news programmes you're watching, I suppose because it's quite cheap, you get like someone from the Taxpayers Alliance and someone from right the other end, and you get them on television, and you make them have a fight. And that was actually how we covered huge amounts of, on TV. TV news covered a lot of issues that way, particularly rolling news. And so you get this sense that you're in this kind of polarised country, and then it's quite easy to kind of turn that up a bit when it came to things like the referendum campaign and other things like that, and I think that was it's such a shame, because actually most people are just somewhere near the middle. And, but it's the people who shout loudest at the extremes who will create the best telly.
Well, exactly, and I feel like that's always been the case. But like you can see with the Labour 33-point lead, it's just most people out there are not paying attention to any of it. Most people are just worrying about their homes and their families, and they'll go with whoever's going to protect them the best. And it's still very new social media.
Yes.
You know, we're still, it's like the steam trains have just come in, and we think we've got a hang of it, and we think when people say, oh, it's a bubble, I know it's a bubble, you think, no, you have no idea how much, you know, we're like tiny, tiny babies with this thing.
Yeah, and always the people who leave and say, you know, I invented this, but I literally had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
I find that really unsettling, the people who leave Silicon Valley.
I saw you say somewhere that and so I have an admission to make, that reality TV and voting people off sort of led to the downfall, essentially, of British democracy.
People got really... No, I don't know if it... Yeah, I think people got... It was the biggest... You know this. It's the biggest genre of the noughties. People absolutely... the biggest star of that generation, by the way, the biggest star got into the White House only because of The Apprentice. He would never... And I think that people really got into voting all the time. And Simon Cowell's big idea was to have a referendum show. This was before you could not say the word referendum out loud because people were like that if they ever heard it again. And he wanted to have a studio, a big, like, shiny floor, and then get the audience every week to have a referendum on something that Simon Cowell would decide. And then there'd be a big red phone in the middle of the stage, and Downing Street would be able to ring in, or challenged to ring in and justify themselves.
Well, it sounds a good idea. Here's my admission. So it would have been 1992, something like that. I was at Planet 24. It's my second ever job in TV. And Charlie Parsons, head of Planet 24, he says, I want to buy a desert island. I said, I have this idea, I buy a desert island, I don't know what to do with it. Would you have a little think? I thought, okay. I'd just been to see that play We Clo, the Carter thing,
Yeah.
there's other people.
Yeah.
And I said, look, just send a bunch of people from different walks of life over there and see how they get on. He's like, yeah, I see that. He said, maybe there needs to be something more. So I went away and had another think about it. And there was someone who worked there at the time who was the boss, and I didn't think was very good. And he was surrounded by very, very talented people. And I was thinking, and I hadn't really had a job before, so this was still news to me, that you could have incompetent bosses. And I thought, it's interesting you're the least useful person in this building, I was thinking. And then I thought, well, okay, on that island, why don't they vote off the least useful person at the end of each week? Wouldn't that be a great way of promoting social justice, is what I thought. That show, other people took it on and developed it.
Yes.
It became Survivor,
Yeah.
which is the biggest show in history.
Yeah.
Big Brother. It was made by Mark Burnett, who went on
Yeah.
to make The Apprentice.
And has all the tapes of Trump that he will never release.
Exactly.
Saying terrible
So
hits.
I have to say all of this is my fault, so
I
I just
have-
wanted to apologise.
I think it was your fault. Yeah,
I
I think, yes. But we are actually, rather sadly, we are that island now, but just with sewage lapping our shores. And we're on the island.
See, it's fascinating because he based it on the fact that he'd done a show that was just Joanna Lumley on an island, right? Now that works, right? That's
you
a
try and
society
scale
that
it up and it goes wrong
Exactly.
really fast.
Suddenly you add one more person, and then there's
Yeah,
there's
and
2
then
million more.
suddenly you're in the sewage island.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's,
Politics for you, would that be a world you'd want to enter into?
oh God, this is... do you know, I always wanted to go into politics my whole life, from when I was 5 until when I got to university. But I still wanted to go into politics when I got to university. And I thought it would be absolutely interesting. I'd be totally fascinated. This is what I wanted to do. And I went to Oxford, and they have the Oxford Union, which is the big debating society. And I thought, this is the thing that everybody does. Yes, I'm going to sign up for 3 years. It's slightly cheaper than 1 year, but it's still, you know, no, it's more expensive, but it's slightly cheaper than if I sign up year by year. And I joined it, and then I just met, sorry to say if anyone was hugely successful in this society, I met all the people who are involved in it. I thought, oh my God, and I had this really sad, actually, moment of scales falling from my eyes where I thought, oh my God, these are what people in politics are like. I can't do this. And so I then had my ambition was gone. And I have to say that some of the people, one of them's now the Prime Minister, that, you know, they were, and I just felt like...
At time of recording, I should say.
At time of, yeah.
You never know.
We'll go outside, yeah. We'll go outside and find it. Yeah, so I just thought, I can't. And so then I was no longer had this ambition to go into politics. And so that was but I was always really interested in
And despite where we are now, and despite the voice that you have, and despite the constituency that you have, you still wouldn't...
No, it would be a failed state in about 6 hours, really.
Do you know what?
Arguably teetering, but...
That's what I think with Boris Johnson. Whenever I was seeing him, I was thinking, that's how I'd run the country.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a great attention to detail. I'm like good at saying something. I could say something, and people would go, oh yeah, let's do that, and then I would just forget about it. So I felt in that
Yeah.
regard, I felt
Yeah.
some empathy with him.
Well, I think a lot of people, actually, I think a lot of people sort of felt they could see aspects of themselves in it. It's like, here is a chaotic person who, you know, I don't know, maybe has children all over town, and it's like, and you know, he was more like the ancient, the ancient, you know how the ancient Greek gods or whatever, just that's why he's so into them, are just so completely fallible, forever raping animals and doing disgusting things. And it's like, you know, it wasn't like a sort of worthy kind of, you know, churchy prime minister. I think they really liked the sheer decadence, but then eventually they stopped liking it.
Yes, don't they just? So how do we? You're not going to go into politics.
No,
okay.
no.
And also an awful lot of other people are not going to go into politics.
No,
is the
I
truth.
know.
And
I mean, that's
an awful lot of people who would want the world to be a slightly better place, maybe a more progressive place, who knows. What is the thing one can do? As you say, you win every election there's ever been in the centre. Okay, you get the 20% of people in the centre, you win any election for the rest of the time. What is to be done to win hearts and minds and to win those people over? And what isn't to be done?
Well, I do. I think that we're in a sort of bit of a. I think we've had lots of mini democratic crises, and I think that underneath what is on the surface now, and no politician has acknowledged this or appears to be talking about this, I think we're in a much bigger democratic crisis than you think. I keep banging on about this poll, but I just find it so shocking. There was a poll the other week that found that 61% of 18 to 35-year-olds believed that Britain would benefit from a strong leader who had no need for parliament or elections. It's a really reputable poll copy. I find that so, you know, I have to believe in the possibility of politics to help people's lives get better, and I really do believe in that. But I can see why people have turned away. And there are lots of different things that have caused that. And unfortunately, when people do turn away from politics, they turn away from sort of all politicians. They think they're all the same. And I can see why. You know, I'm not trying to... Lots of people have been sort of ignored or, you know, betrayed or whatever. And then they've seen things and they've followed rules and seen that others have broken them. And all of these things are small crises that are happening all the time, but there's no acknowledgement at all from the centre at the moment, by which I mean Westminster, that we're in a really bad state. I think that if you actually go around normal places and talk to people, I mean, just outside of all those kind of bubbles, you hear people say extraordinary things, and people are so angry and they're so much more angry than is acknowledged.
I think it's exactly right. I think 5 years of boredom might not be the worst thing in the world, just 5 years.
Oh, God. I mean, I just need 2 decades of not having anything to write.
Oh, my God. That would be lovely.
Yeah, I mean, people just can't... People are exhausted by it. That's the real feeling. I mean, now, to be going into winter with a cost of living crisis that was what we were talking about until, you know, 2.5 weeks ago, and now we're talking about a financial crisis on top of it. You know, people are exhausted and so angry that something has been made worse for them. And I'm, you know, whatever side you're on, it doesn't matter. You know, lots of people in my family voted different ways in all sorts of things. I am for people who just feel like politics has been done to them for the last however many years, instead of in their name. And so I always want to be... it doesn't really matter in lots of ways which side you're on. You just feel like, can you please make it make sense and make the chaos stop?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to start respecting the other side, and you've got to start, you know, they're going to be in power sometimes, we're going to be in power sometimes, so let's make sure they're not absolutely nuts when they get in power, and we'll try and do the same thing.
Yes.
So that's what just happened. What happens next, do you think? Do you think A, Trump gets in, and do you think B, Starmer gets in?
Oh, God, I can't stand it. Why aren't they... In the old days, you were gone forever when you left politics. Rightly, right? I've got the person most likely to succeed Liz Truss is Boris Johnson. The person most likely to get the Republican nomination is Donald Trump. This is like the MCU. Everyone can come back in a different timeline. No, okay? No. They should have been put in a, you know, like that thing they built over Chernobyl. The two of them, Johnson and Trump, for all, you know, eternity or until whatever happened between them and one killed the other, underneath a big concrete dome.
And then suddenly they kiss.
Yeah. It's very hard to work out how their story would have ended. But that would not be for us. It would be all happening under the concrete dome with no cameras, which would have destroyed both of them. Just the lack of anyone watching.
I remember the lovely Sean Locke once saying, he said, I tell you what, they should put all those people in the Big Brother house and pretend they're filming them and just not film them at all, leave them there for 4 weeks. But
Yeah.
then he said, and this is the problem with our modern world, I'll tell you what, I'd fucking love to see that.
Brilliant. Oh.
There it is. And
Yes,
like,
you'd think, I think that it's quite hard to see how Liz Truss can get it back. She's given voters what I believe is now referred to as the ick, and they've got the ick. You know, I'm sure she's watched Love Island. She could go on it in the future, but she
would be amazing on Love Island.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, and that would be a hell of a series, wouldn't it?
It would be a hell of a series.
Yeah.
Again.
Whoa.
I think I'd watch it.
Yeah,
I'd watch it. And yeah, I think it feels quite hard to come back. You know, I don't like to make too many predictions in politics. It's quite hard to come back off a 30-point poll lead.
Yeah.
I just don't like to make too many predictions. But, you know, their ability to defenestrate is definitely... I mean, I'm sure they will just have another go at finding someone else. It's like, don't we have others? Like, who is coming round from the back now? They're getting some
It is like The Apprentice. Who wants to do it this week?
Yeah. Yes, it really is.
I loved it like Grant Shapps the other day saying, I'll step in and be... Yeah, I bet you'll step
I'll be
in, mate.
caretaker. Yeah, I know.
Oh, you know what? I'll step in and be Prime Minister. Come on, I'll do it.
Caretaker Prime Minister.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. Caretaker Prime Minister isn't a thing. This is like this, you know, we're now talking in ridiculous ways. We don't have caretaker Prime Ministers.
No.
This is how they all talk now. And yeah, Grant Shapps, I mean, a man who's had multiple online A-listers, is he the best guy?
I think he's a series of the best guys.
He's now, he's a one of them is a grandee. He is, you know, I think I suspect they might try and find someone else again, but they can't keep doing that and saying we won't have a general election. I think there'll be unrest. Sorry, I mean, again, I don't want to predict things, especially not riots, but yeah, riots.
Yeah, I'd love to see this riots. You're going, yep, told you so.
Yeah.
There's the tragic figure of Michael Gove that you think, whatever happens, however many people rule themselves out, it is still never going to be you, which is so... But you can... And he sort of knows now, right? He sort of knows now.
He does know, but he identifies with Tyrion Lannister, who I think for some of the series he thought was going to actually win at the end, but then realised what. So then he's probably no longer identifies with him. But he's now a sort of pure... Despite presenting as someone super rational, he's now just a pure agent of chaos, like just stirring it all the time. There was a briefing in the Sunday Times this weekend, I don't know if anyone saw it, which was so mad. And I was just thinking, which was, you know, Michael has never found his place in his son. He's full of darkness. I was just thinking, someone in Number 10 has actually, in the middle of this crisis, got on the phone and gone, Michael has never found his place in his son. He's surrounded by darkness. Like, oh my God, we're all quite bored of your psychodrama now. We're all quite bored of it. Although, again, I read it.
Yeah, of course you did.
Of course I did.
Let's get away from the state of the world for a little bit
Yes,
and talk about
please.
your actual writing and your process. You do so much writing. What's your working week like?
Well, my working week is quite... well, I write the columns on the mornings of the... I follow the news, like it's been like being chained to a lunatic, and you just think... You wake up every morning thinking, where's the lunatic taking me now?
Where do you consume your news, by the way, usually? What's your...
I'll read it on my phone, I'll read it on, my laptop. I never do things like... I never watch, Prime Minister's Questions. I've watched that twice in 5 years.
Yeah.
I'll get the box set. But I don't watch the Sunday morning show. I mean, I can't. It's just the weekend. I have children. So I try not to do all those things, because otherwise I think you can actually get quite sucked into that kind of type of groupthink in a way, where everyone's... In that way that people, when the Sue Gray report came out, was
God, these names I forget.
I know, you forget them,
Sue
you bury
Gray
them,
even.
You bury them.
She was so big in Series 3.
For months.
I've forgotten about it.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And people were like, no, there's no smoking gun. And I remember thinking, no. It's really easy to get caught up in, I know this sounds a bit like, it's one of those pollsters saying it, but the signal and the noise. And the noise is all like, there's no smoking gun, there's this and that. But the signal is, people watch their families die on iPads. Okay, he will not survive this. It's just not, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's just not possible for him to survive. So I sometimes think you can get a bit caught up in the whole routine of it if you watch all the specific things. So I don't watch all those things. I get up in the morning, I think, what shall I write about today? I never decide apart from the morning. And then I never start at the beginning, which I'm telling you this because I have told other people and they think it's really weird. I don't start at the top ever. I just write a few things in a Word document and then I kind of move them around and then I write some more things and gradually I start, and then I might like halfway through think of how I'll start it. And out of it, eventually something is kind of creeping. And then I about 2/3 of the way down think, oh, right, that's what I think about this thing, because I never really know what I think about something unless I've done the writing about it. So I never know what, and then that's why you sometimes get at the end of my columns, there's like, needle scratch, serious bit coming up. And so sometimes at the end there's a little serious bit. Also, I feel like if you've told a few jokes at the start, it's a bit of spoonful of sugar, and you can say, but I often don't know what that serious bit is, as it were, until I've written the other bit. I make sense of it by doing the writing.
Well, that's what jokes can do for you.
Yes.
Can't they?
Well, that it's trying to think your way into it. But yeah, it actually is quite a sort of, the structure of it explains what the thing is, if that makes sense. And so, and actually, talking about lots of writing, doing lots of events like this, it's through lots of people's questions, particularly like normal, ordinary civilian people have much better questions than journalists. And it's through answering loads of those questions that I've actually worked out how I write about things and what I think about them. I mean, I really should be paying like everyone here for therapy. But that
sounds like an offer to me.
Yeah. And I find, yeah, so it's a real mess. I don't have a like clear through line at all when I start.
But that's the trouble with a lot of columnists. They do have a clear through line because they believe something very passionately and they tell you why it's right. You think, yeah, but you've said the other thing, you've said something else. You know, I think that one of the reasons people love your columns is you're not lecturing anyone or telling anyone what to think. You're just saying, this seems off.
This seems bad. I know, but I don't know. If a newspaper column is ridiculous, like, you know, in 1 year you go like, okay, you know, now can you be a military strategist? No, I don't know. I don't know how to take the Donbass. I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah,
you
know how to take the
like
Donbass.
Guilt market. Guilt market, go. I don't know, you know, could I take it? It's being I don't like to try and pretend to be an expert in lots of things I'm not.
We're going to have to get to questions. From the audience. It's going to be a joy to get to questions from the audience in a moment. I've got two more things to ask you. What's next for you? Television? Would you write a novel? It's fun.
Yeah, I've heard you've been having some success with it. The most successful of all time. Television. I'm doing some television. I'm doing various TV projects at the moment. I've done something with Armando Iannucci, and then I'm doing another one which has been sort of announced, which is kind of behind the scenes on a superhero film.
Fun.
Which is fun. Those are for HBO, and actually so I've got a couple of other things. There's various other things in.
Will you still be writing 2 columns a week though?
Oh, I'll just have to keep going, Richard, until the chaos calms down. Soon it will be stopping. Yes, definitely. I mean, it's part of how I get through it.
Well, that's a relief for everybody here. We're going to go to questions now from the audience, and we've got some from online as well. I will start with this one. Someone says, you described Boris Johnson as you smirking fiberglass Toby jug.
I can't remember any of these, but yes.
It's the best ever description of Boris Johnson. It says what here, but who do you read that makes you laugh? Also, who do you read that makes sense of the world to you?
Oh, well, I tell you, there's so many. I mean, I read by the way, every single thing I write about is mostly based on the work of journalists, reporters, TV journalists, photographers. I spend a huge amount of time looking at Google Images and trying to make my eyes go funny and think, now what do you look like? Of politicians. I spend a huge amount of time doing that. And sometimes it's from footage, like, you know, you can look at Theresa May when she was so exhausted with the Brexit deal, and every time she got up in the House of Commons, I thought, it's an Anglepoise lamp. But you need to, like, it's a way of looking, so I spend a lot of time on those things. Yes, sorry, remind me what the...
They were asking you who makes you laugh, and I was saying who
makes me laugh? Okay, well, there's all the sketch writers make me laugh so much. I love John Crace, I love Rob Hutton, Tom Peck, my old friend Michael Deacon, who don't long does the sketch. They all make me laugh. I tell you who I really love. I love in the Washington Post this writer called Alexandra Petrie, because she writes about their politics. They don't have, like, sketch writers. Why? They have so much raw material. You know, they take themselves really seriously. They have, you know, they had... who came in to sort of, you couldn't replace PJ O'Rourke, but who came in, they don't have hardly any humorists. They have no humorists writing in their papers, but they take themselves very, very seriously. Whereas in the British press, we know we're scum, you see, so we're able to have more of a laugh. But she is brilliant writing about Trump, writing about their politics, but I don't really see, I think it's such a shame that they have very few
Remind us of the name again.
Alexandra Petrie, she's brilliant. She's really young, she works for the Washington Post.
Should we take a question from our lovely live audience here? Very bad at this.
We can't really see. No, here we go.
Almost impossible to see.
Right, we'll just listen.
I'm very happy for the mic controllers to.
I think they are. Yes, it's all under control.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
I'm very much enjoying. I'm over here. Sorry.
To
your left. Can you see me?
Oh God. Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm really. There is a microphone over there in case you think I'm actually delusional. But yes.
So, as a journalist, columnist, satirist, do you fear cancel culture?
Oh God, I mean, not really. I mean, not really. No. I mean, the most people I hear talking about it, to be perfectly honest, certainly if they're talking about politics, all have their own TV show. So I feel like they're doing okay. No, I don't. I mean, clearly some people do fear it, and it has become a much bigger thing. What, for something I wrote about politics? Unlikely. I mean, I don't think I'm on any Christmas card list with the politicians, but but yeah, probably it'll happen tomorrow now. And we'll look back on this as the last,
That was ironic, wasn't it, when she said that?
I made it happen.
Yeah, and also Richard was laughing, and look at him now, both of them. Both of them in one go. That's interesting. I think people are not used to having people immediate pushback on their views.
No.
I think that sometimes
it was stone tablets for a very long time, and now people feel they can comment back on the, clap back. Am I using that again? And I don't know.
Yeah, am I saying that correctly?
Am I saying?
I couldn't believe she said clap back.
Yeah, at the stone tablets. Can you clap back at the stone tablets? Something like that. Yeah, I think that people say at present, but yeah, ask me in a week.
Let's take another one from the audience. Very happy for the mic people to choose whoever they wish.
Yeah.
Is this on? Oh, yeah, it is. Sorry. You mentioned at one point in passing that in some ways the right seems to use social media better than the left. And I always wondered whether there's not a sort of, shall we call it, natural imbalance having to do with the philosophy, because the left is essentially about coming to a consensus about discussing matters. It's not about imposing ideas, whereas the right is more comfortable with that. And social media, the way it is at the moment, the whole 140 characters, etc., is pretty much kind of focused towards black and white and division, etc. And I was wondering, what would you, if you have any ideas about how can the left actually turn that around?
Well, I think if you look at Twitter, I think it's very left-leaning. I actually, people may not feel that to be the case, but it is very left-leaning, and you see all the things that trend the most, and then, it's not real life. But it was slightly skewed because obviously someone ran the whole of the free world off his loo. Yes. on that website. So we do think that someone quite, we think of it as a sort of more right-wing platform, but I know you can't put social media back in its box, but I'm not sure that it's the best mechanism for getting big ideas out there. I don't think there are that many big ideas in politics at the moment. I think that's part of the problem. I think there are loads of really big ideas in the voluntary sector, in kind of, big things like aid and things like that. There are really unusual ideas about, getting money directly to people and all things like that. And in tech, there are big ideas. But I feel politics has become almost, too much the kind of social media, it's very shallow. It's very, very shallow. And there's too many gotchas, there's too many, as I say, I just see it as the information trickling down in the matrix, it doesn't really matter what they're arguing about. I think it's it's so anti-productive. It's interesting that, you know, most of the most creative and very, very successful people I know are just simply not on it at all and regard it as a huge time suck and just don't, you know, or they use it simply to put their work on it. I mean, I'm a bit crap because I've never had a Facebook account or an Instagram account, so I'm, you know, the last pure human. But I don't know. I think the less we kind of thought about it like that, and the more we actually thought about, yes, I mean, just joining together in lots of different ways. I think people realise, you know, clicktivism and being an activist in a web browser, just forget it. You've got to get out there.
Well, that's the interesting thing is we, and a lot of people in this room, certainly us, we came to social media fairly fully formed.
Yeah.
So we sort of treat a 21st century battle with 20th century weapons, because we think we know how discourse is done, and we think, okay, we'll bend it to this thing. You think, no, this is not how this works. Whereas I think our kids have grown up with this and they see through it. Yes. And they go, this doesn't seem to be the correct way to run the world, and hopefully that leads to that.
I think that, yes, I definitely think that there's that younger people think can see through all of it.
Yeah, and
I mean, always older people, you know, all that. How many years did people go on about media studies and wow, what a stupid degree it was? Everyone should have had it.
I know.
A lot of the people who really hate it,
Media studies and sociology, the two exams.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if only we'd had them. Yeah.
There it is. I'll tell you someone else. No, we're just we're the worst possible age. We're the worst possible age for social media. It really caught us unawares. Another question. Lovely.
Yeah. Ah, look, right there. Thank you. The balcony.
Is it on now?
Right,
perfect. There we go.
Don't shout now.
Right, so I work for a tech startup in sales, and we launched our diversity and inclusion committee in January. So various themes. So we got some black politicians last month. The theme for this month, as well as Black History Month, was sort of females in journalism. So Marina Hyde was top of my list, but we didn't have a budget, so which is a great irony, by the way. But anyway,
just email me at The Guardian. I've only got one email. I don't even have a Gmail.
I didn't think you'd reply, so I'll ask you for next year.
I literally don't have a Gmail. I only have my Guardian email address. I'm like, again, the last pure human.
But on that
when
I
get sacked, I'll have no way of communicating.
I'm fascinated to hear what the question's going to be.
Yeah. No, so
sorry.
I was going to ask, basically, I'm quite big on sort of females in the workplace, because I was raised by my mother. My parents are still together, but raised by my mother, and she's an NHS consultant, an amazing woman, and all that sort of stuff. But what are your thoughts in terms of diversity at editor level? So you've got Emily Sheffield, who I think is George Osborne's sister-in-law, and then Catherine Viner at The Guardian. But in terms of that high-level sort of journalism, in terms of equality, in terms of females and sort of women of colour, what are your thoughts on increasing that pool?
Well, I would say that the gender balance is much better than the women of colour balance, definitely. But it's got a lot, I mean, we're doing a lot better all the time at The Guardian. And, you know, other papers, I've always felt that women in journalism have got on, certainly in recent times, much better than they ever used to, much, much better. But I do think the diversity, we have real targets at The Guardian that we're always trying to audit and improve all the time. I'm not sure that all of the newspapers do, but I don't want to sort of denigrate them, but I'm not sure that all of them do, and I think it would be, it's always better to have bigger pools of people, and it's better to have, I'm sorry to say because this is clearly not me, but it's better to have much bigger pools of people from all different classes, because the trouble is that it's quite a narrow social class in lots of ways, and this is not me, but there are people who have much better stories to tell who feel like they're kind of kept out of it. And I think we should make a huge effort to recruit in communities. You don't necessarily have had to go on to university. You don't have to do all of these things, and we would get many, many better stories and many different voices. So I'm all for it, and I try and sort of assist as much as I can. But I think it is getting better, but not quick enough at all.
It makes every single company better, is the truth. We had to end them
Without
for years
any
and years and years.
question.
We just got better and better. We made more and more and more money.
Yeah,
So that's it.
yes.
If anyone right-wing wants to chat to me about it, I'm very happy to talk
Yeah.
to you about it. It was enormously
The economics
profitable.
are compelling.
To suddenly have people with different stories in the room. Who would have thought that that would make money?
Yeah.
I'm going to do an online one because I've completely forgotten about online questions. Which of the last 4 prime ministers are the most to blame, in your opinion, for the mess this country is in?
It's a great question. I mean, different ones at different times. I mean, David Cameron, he opened the gate. He opened the gate. It's like Stranger Things. Yes, you know, some other people came up. Maybe he opened the gate.
He didn't mean to open the gate. He just left it ajar because he thought that he thought it was going to be fine. He didn't realise that the ball was so close to the gate.
But they all had that, you know, Theresa May with her stupid red lines and boxing herself in, and then, you know, I would have said Johnson, but it's suddenly all to play for. I mean, it could be Truss. I think it's probably.
It's quite hard to blame. It's quite hard to blame Liz Truss for being the worst of the 4. She's only been in there for about 3 weeks.
But look at what she's achieved. No. She's got a very, very strong chance of nicking this. Let me tell you.
Yeah, she's
very strong.
Yeah, an outside chance, like Hamza in Strictly Come Dancing. Do you keep your eye? You keep your eye on that Liz Truss. Which of the last 27 prime ministers? I would go Macmillan. I think Macmillan is that's where it all went wrong. Let's have another question, shall we, from the audience?
Oh. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for keeping us all sane over the last 6 years. My question is, do you ever get tired of it? Do you ever get tired of having to write about the absolute nonsense that we are seeing on a daily basis? I mean, just today you had Theresa Coffey, Deputy Prime Minister, didn't know the answer to the question she was being asked. Kwasi Kwarteng pretending that the IMF were actually upgrading Britain's growth. I mean, every single day there are 5 or 6 things you could be writing about. You mentioned how your selection process, which was previously going to be my question. So my fallback question is, one of your great predecessors at The Guardian, Neville Carter, said when he was an opera correspondent, but he preferred going to the cricket, and he used this lovely phrase, you know, he was slumming it when he went to watch the cricket. Do you ever feel you're slumming it watching this absolute mess every single day, and do you get tired of it, and do you sometimes think, I just can't be bothered doing it anymore? No,
I don't think I can't be bothered, because it is a trade, and you've got to get up and everyone has a day where you think, oh, I don't really feel like it today, but I have to say currently I think it's really bad, and obviously during bits of the pandemic where they were so obviously mishandling the response, and politics is a high stakes game and it's played with people's lives, and sometimes it's, very often it's a matter of life or death. In the last couple of years it has been. So that was pretty depressing, yeah, and I think as you're going into winter in a terrible cost of living crisis, and they've done this on top of it, yes, I think it's quite hard to, but I don't think I would walk away from writing about it. In a way, I'd sort of run towards it.
Another question from our audience here.
Thank you very much. As you said at the beginning, part of the joy of your column is the leaveningly serious stuff with all the popular culture references. In fact, I learn about popular culture by reading the column. Do you actively have to keep up with that as well as the politics to be able to do that, or does it just sort of happen naturally?
No, I do that anyway, and I always think like that anyway. I think really associatively, so I'm always like, I could watch a cricket game and think that just reminds me of something that happened in Westminster last week, or vice versa. I'm always thinking of, it's just the way my brain works. So and then, anyway, it's much more pleasurable to keep up with popular culture than political culture, which popular culture's had rather a golden era of late.
Yeah, hasn't it?
Yeah, it just, unfortunately, the rest of it has been, so that's rather a nice break to get away from it. But of course, you're always watching something and you're thinking, this is just like what happened this week. Even if you're watching something completely, watching some absolutely anodyne, I don't know, comedy, or just to kind of switch off, you think, Oh, that's exactly like what happened today.
It's like Married at First Sight Australia. You think
Yeah.
this is the last 3 years.
Well, you learn about, those shows are really great because you learn so much about human behaviour and extremists and what people will do. I mean, I know a lot of people who write dramas and comedies and things like that are obsessed with all shows like Married at First Sight and all of those things because it's just like, what, you know, watching people in extreme situations, what they'll say, what they'll do. It's, you know, it's
I know
quite...
there are certain lines where you just think, oh, there's no way I would have put that in the script.
Yeah, you couldn't.
Absolutely amazing.
You couldn't.
Any more questions from our lovely audience here in the Cadogan Hall?
Hello? Oh, okay, wasn't expecting that.
You sound like me.
Over. Hi, I'm up, like, left.
Yes, okay. Oh, right, there we go.
Hi. At risk of asking a really flippant question compared to everyone else's, who's your favourite, like, character to write about?
That's a great question.
It is a very good question. I quite like writing about... I don't know, it depends. They've all been good at different times. And sometimes you think, it's really depressing, you know, you think, right, we need some new characters, and then, you know, Johnson will come in and you'll be like, okay, who's this Dominic Cummings then? And then eventually you're like, get him off, bring in some new ones. I quite like, if Richard Branson always amuses me because he always writes and complains, so I find that quite funny. And every complaint is like a greater self-own. There was one that he did in the pandemic, right at the start, when it was obviously really brutal for the NHS, and Richard's like chief interaction with the NHS had been suing it a few years previously. And he was trying to get, he's a big climate change advocate, owns an airline, and he was trying to get a bailout for his airline, and he actually said that he wanted to put up Necker Island, his private island, as collateral for the government. It's like, what? I mean,
wow.
It's like your island lair, like sort of Blofeld trying to get a bridging loan. It's like, what? This is so mad. Anyway, I didn't say that because I didn't think of that bit at the time, but I did say that, you know, isn't this the island that, I don't know if you follow Richard, I follow everything about Richard Branson, so he, you know, every 2 years there's a hurricane and it all gets raised to ground, or there's a fire and Kate Winslet has to carry his mother to safety. You know, something always happens like that. You can't put that up as your surety. Anyway, and so I think, then I put at the end of, well, I think, to get, you know, I'm not religious, but if I were, I would wonder whether God was trying to punish me for not paying my taxes in the appropriate jurisdiction. He then wrote a letter saying, I'm very saddened that you would think that God would be trying to punish me for not paying... I think The Guardian actually published it on the letters page under a headline that read something like Benevolence of Richard Branson. But every time he writes in, it's better. He always seems to make it worse.
Do you have much contact with it with anybody else you've offended? Any other complaints or any other fan mail?
Actually, I'll tell you something. There was something okay, I wrote some column about Elon Musk, and in the old vaudeville phrase, I had to think of a way to get off. And so I had to just come up with some line. I can't even remember why it ended this way, but anyway, I said, arguing on the internet is like playing real tennis. Even if you win, you're still a twat. And anyway, on Monday morning in The Guardian, there was a letter. You know, I've always really enjoyed Marina Hyde's columns. She's really, you know, blah, blah, blah. However, I'm extremely disappointed. I'm the president of the Real Tennis Society. No, but wait. Someone actually asked this question last night, and so I answered the question. I told the story about it. Anyway, at the end of the talk last night, which was in Bristol, this really nice young woman came up to me and she said, can you just write a really cheeky message to my dad in this book? You see, it's him who's the president of the Real Tennis Society.
Wow.
I mean...
Wow. His name? Richard Branson.
It's the circle of life. Anyway, wow. So yeah. Otherwise, no feedback at all from politicians, ever.
I love the fact you don't upset Elon Musk, but you do upset the head of the Real Tennis Association.
I know. I should have put handball or something. I mean, whatever I'd put, someone would have just said, actually, this is outrageous.
Any more from our lovely audience here?
Yeah, hello. Speaking of feedback from politicians, Marina, it's the smirking fiberglass Toby Jug's sister here.
Rachel.
And he thinks you're very funny.
Oh.
I'm sure he enjoys your columns as much as I do. Thank you for a highly pleasurable evening. I've got a trade question, which is to do with, this is a Guardian Live event.
Yeah.
Do you think, and obviously people have found you from Twitter, and they found you from The Guardian, and they found you from guardian.co.uk, do you think you would work as well if you were transplanted into the ecology of another newspaper, let's say the New York Times or the Daily Mail or the Daily Telegraph?
Well,
are you being poached live?
Well, Rachel, as I believe I might have told you before, some of those people have come to me before, but I do like being free to air. I really appreciate the fact that anyone can read The Guardian, and I also really appreciate the fact that I can write whatever I like at The Guardian. And quite a lot of times I've been... Thank you, Guardian! And sometimes people have been very nice from other papers and have offered me jobs at some of the papers you've mentioned. And they always say, no, you can write whatever you like. And I always say, but I know I can't, you know. Especially like something like, I don't know, you sometimes think, as an example, something like the New York Times. You think, I mean, no one really tells jokes in the New York Times at all. Like maybe the last joke was about Dan Quayle or something. And so often sometimes people say, will you do things? And I think, you think I just wouldn't work there so well. So I like the free-to-air thing, and I like being able to say whatever I like. And I mean, maybe you can at other papers. I don't really know enough about it. What do you think, Rach?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking me. Marina, I was moved from one paper to the Mail on Sunday, and I was told just be Rachel, and it was never like that. So I think you're right. I think being able to write what you like is the biggest, is really worth it.
How long have papers got left, do we think?
Oh, I mean, you know...
I come from telly. I tell you now, terrestrial telly's got 10 years, but I'm 51, so...
Yeah. It's difficult. I mean, things like print are dying much slower than people thought it would. So it's difficult. I mean, online is just a huge thing. You've just got to find various different ways. There's lots of different arguments about how to pay for it.
But making a living in the newspaper business is like making a living as a chimney sweep. You've done very well. Very
I've sort of come at the fag end of a lot of that I think it's so much harder, and I just really feel it's very, very difficult for younger people.
I know. Well, when I started in TV, oh my goodness, those were the days.
Yes.
Yeah, I missed them.
Yeah.
But as you did as well. Probably got room for one more question. We'll take one more from the audience and one more from online. So have we got one more from our audience? No pressure. Don't make it. It's more of a statement than a question. Make it a.
Thank you very much. I love both of your writing. You talk so passionately, Marina, and you've got such a huge platform, but then you also talk quite dismissively about what you do. Are you sure you're not trying to change the world? And if you were trying to change the world, how would you do it?
Oh, it's a good question.
That's a good last question.
I just think lots of life is just trying to get through it as best as you can. And so I don't feel that... I'm trying to entertain people and trying to sometimes reflect their beliefs and sometimes challenge their beliefs. I don't know about changing the world. I'm not sure that newspaper columnists should be in charge of that. Sorry, Rachel, but we had one running the country before, and it didn't work out very well.
Okay, one final question is from one of our people watching live. Thank you all for watching, sending in your questions. There's certainly been a lot of villains in the last 6 years who are in your book. Who have been the heroes of the last 6 years? That's a nice place to finish.
Yeah, there have been some great... I mean, you know, you look at things like... I mean, I knew at the start of the pandemic they'd all have a go at footballers, and it's just such an easy thing for them. And then, you know, watching Marcus Rashford, and actually lots of other players did amazing things during the pandemic. It was absolutely amazing. I mean... to be able to show your children that guy and you know, watch him come off the pitch, sometimes occasionally having scored the last winner and then just come straight off and start talking about child poverty. It's like, oh my God, this is absolutely every politician's nightmare. And I think watching someone like that become, I think obviously there have been amazing people in the arts or whatever. I mean, politics, it's been quite thin on the ground, I've got to say. But the people who've come up against them, and, you know, Rashford won twice against them.
Yeah.
It's people coming from the outside. I think it's really interesting watching someone like Martin Lewis, who has been doing the work of about 4 government departments, and people just feel, you know, but this is slightly what I mean. The ideas are coming from outside politics, and those people that are kind of catching people thinking, wow, that guy really is looking out for me, that guy's trying to help me, this is practical, is really interesting. They're coming from outside politics, but outside politics there have been plenty.
That's good. Oh, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you all in the hall. Thank you at home as well. Marina Hyde's book, What Just Happened. Listen, you already know it's brilliant because you've read many of the columns, but to have them all there, and as I say, you can just spend months and months looking at it. Your family will come in, they'll read them. There's so many laughs in this book, and there's just so much great stuff. You can buy it. I think people watching can click on a link and buy it. You are very welcome to go to a shop and buy it. I think that's available.
I think they're getting one.
No way.
I believe it's part. I've signed 900 of them this afternoon, so I believe.
Wow.
Don't tell me that wasn't necessary. I believe it was.
Now I think about it, I shouldn't have signed them as well, should I? Which so sorry that I did. You are going to absolutely love it. Don't let that stop you buying a second one for Christmas for somebody else.
Can I please say thank you so much to my idol, Richard Osman.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and thank you, Marina Hyde.
Thank you. Thank you.